Life.
Welcome, boys and girls, to episode 11 of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon, and on today's episode, we will be going over the G1 Climax, the NXT television from this week, as well as Miz and Mrs, as always. But on this week, a little special episode, since we're recording this on a Friday, we will be going over some of the news that has happened over the past couple days that we were not able to cover on the Bulletcast. Which, if I could give you a little bit of inside scoop, this was kind of the whole reason I wanted to do the podcast in the first place, because we were gonna maybe change our schedule to do the podcast on a Wednesday. Maybe I can do the podcast a little bit later, and then I can cover some things we don't talk about and some breaking news that happened. So this is kind of the first time that I've actually been able to realize my full potential on this podcast that I wanted to. So we're going to talk some breaking news that has happened over the past couple days. So we're going to start off with that. Some news that actually happened, I believe, before the podcast or before the Bulletcast, but were able to cover it. Maria Kanellis suffered a broken wrist, and this was while training for the Evolution pay-per-view. She posted a photo on her Instagram of the broken wrist, being very vague, just saying she was training, and she said that she's going to be out for a few weeks, maybe a couple months. But then she said if you do the math, she'll still be able to make it for the Evolution pay-per-view. So probably she's going to be involved in some sort of like big women's battle royal or something. I don't expect her to be in a some sort of match, like a singles match or anything like that. She's with Mike Kanellis at the moment. She hasn't actually made her full return to television, so not a whole lot going on with him, and it's a little bit of a shame. I mean, he debuted in WWE. They had a nice little thing going with their gimmick, and then she gets pregnant, and then he gets kind of booted down the card and is not really on main roster television anymore. But good for him. He announced, I think he's been like 1 year sober a couple weeks ago, so that's great news to hear. And hopefully, wishing Maria speedy recovery on her wrist injury, and hopefully she's able to come back for the Evolution pay-per-view. So some other news, very big news happening around the world of professional wrestling in the last couple days. Sami Zayn has had his second rotator cuff surgery. Obviously, he had the first one a couple months ago, because you don't want to have two rotator cuff surgeries at the same time, because you kind of need at least one arm to do something. So if you would have both of them at the same time, he would basically have he couldn't use his arms for a couple months, which makes a whole lot of sense. So obviously, it's not like he recovers fully from one and then gets the other. It's just he gets the one and then he's able to do regular things, probably be able to lift his arm over his head or something like that, and then that's when they're given the go-ahead to do the surgery on the other arm. Not sure exactly the timetable for his return, but obviously I'd be shocked if he makes his return by the end of the year. Probably a Royal Rumble bid is the most likely, probably the earliest I would see him coming back. We've talked about it on the Bulletcast a bunch that Sami Zayn just hasn't really, maybe not realized his full potential, but he's just kind of, he could be like the underdog babyface. He could be a Seth Rollins or something, be that top guy in the company, but it's just they haven't booked him that way. Maybe his backstage shenanigans, because Kevin Owens and others have said, he can be kind of strange, and he can be a little off-putting at times, but once you get to know him, he's a nice guy. And honestly, Sami Zayn, probably one of the nicest wrestlers I've ever met. He started the conversation, he tried to talk to me, and even when I moved on to the other wrestler to go on the signing at our WrestleMania table, he was still talking to me, which I thought that was very nice of him. Another person who I might say is the nicest person I've ever met in wrestling, that would be Colt Cabana, and big news coming out that Colt Cabana is suing CM Punk for $1.2 million. That is the amount that was racked up for Colt in legal fees during the Dr. Amon case with him and CM Punk. Real big shame here. I mean, CM Punk and Colt Cabana are kind of like, the two best friends in pro wrestling. Everybody knows them. Obviously, CM Punk reached out to Cabana and wanted to do this podcast just to, he was the person he trusted the most to do this, because he knew once he does this, he's just going to stop. He's not going to do any interviews and talk about it ever again, so he's just going to get it all out there on his friend's podcast. His friend's going to get the buzz from it. He's going to make some money off of it, which he did. And then ultimately, this ended up getting both of them getting sued by the doctor, and they won. Cabana says that CM Punk promised that he was going to pay for all of his legal fees, which, as I said, was at the end was $1.2 million. Cabana was like, okay, because I think the lawyers that was with Cabana, probably I think they were kind of like CM Punk's lawyers, but Colt had his own lawyer as well. And Cabana says that he has a string of text messages laying out that CM Punk explicitly told him that he was going to pay for the legal fees. And then apparently once the trial was over, he kind of backed out and said that he's only going to pay for half. And then Cabana was saying that, like, if you just told me this ahead of time, then I wouldn't have gotten these, expensive ass I wouldn't have, wanted these expensive ass lawyers. I would have just got some cheaper ones. And it's just real sad to see that Cabana and Punk honestly are probably never going to be friends again. Maybe down the line they, rekindle their relationship. But CM Punk, honestly, is one of those guys who might never give up a grudge. I mean, he hasn't come back to WWE for good reason. I mean, he has reason to hold a grudge. Cabana is not the biggest name in wrestling. I mean, he's a huge name, but he's not like a big draw on the indie scene. He's just doing the little towns, making his appearances, getting that money. Probably making a couple grand every appearance, and making those indie appearances aren't going to be able to amount to $1.2 million in legal fees that he can pay off, especially as to live in Chicago. I don't exactly know the living expenses in Chicago. I'm pretty sure it's not cheap. But very sad news to see that it's come down to this, that Cabana and CM Punk have to sue each other. I don't exactly know how that works out. I assume Cabana would have to pay for his legal fees for this trial. I don't think he's going to make Punk pay for those ones as well, but I don't know. I don't exactly know how the legal system works. But just sad news. I mean, Scott Hall said you can either make friends in wrestling or you can make money in wrestling. You can't make both. And it looked like CM Punk and Colt Cabana were able to make a very good friendship, and they kind of started at the bottom and they've kind of worked their way up, and CM Punk obviously made it to a bigger stage than Cabana did, but Cabana has his own little niche of fans, and just tough to see that happen to people who obviously have loved each other and been friends for such a long time. For it to come down to this is something you never want to see. Renee Young is going to be the third person on the announce team for Raw this week, or next week rather, for the go-home show of SummerSlam. So a very big spotlight for Renee. The Jonathan Coachman is out on assignment, doing something, don't exactly know what, but who really cares? Because honestly, this is probably an upgrade from Coach going to Renee. I love Renee. I said on the Bulletcast that she's very underrated. Gave her my superstar spotlight. I think she's great as an announcer, great as the panelist. I'm not the biggest fan of her color and or play-by-play commentary. I mean, she's good. She's probably still better than Coach, but I just think, I'm not saying she's a bad color commentator. I just think she's so great at the backstage and the roundtable discussion type commentator or personality than being on the color. And they have also announced for the Mae Young Classic that the announce team is going to be Renee Young, Beth Phoenix, and Michael Cole. So Michael Cole doing the lead for that, and then obviously Beth Phoenix and Renee Young will be doing the color as well. I assume that's probably going to be the same crew that's going to be doing the Evolution pay-per-view. Obviously, you can have JoJo be the ring announcer. You have enough for the backstage interviewers with Charlie Caruso, Dasha Fuentes, Kathy Kelly. You can have them do that stuff backstage. I don't know if there's going to, because obviously this hasn't been an official announcement yet, but if they do announce that Michael Cole is going to be the Evolution, the play-by-play guy for the Evolution pay-per-view, I don't think there should be that much of an an uproar. I mean, honestly, who should be the main play-by-play person? A person who would come to mind would probably be Renee. Maybe it's a tryout run for Renee, but she has done stuff in the past for NXT and Superstars, so it's not like this is her first time going at the commentary table. But I think having Michael Cole, who's the lead announcer for all the big pay-per-views, Raw, I think this really just kind of shows that WWE is serious about this. They're going to put their best guy on the job. There's going to be so many other women on the show. I'm not saying that he needs to be there if they wanted to put Renee or some other, sport, like some woman in sports that really loves wrestling. I mean, Michelle Beadle comes to mind, but Beadle's not a commentator. She's more of a personality, kind of like Renee. She just, she does the discussion, she does the roundtables types things, but she's not in the booth doing play-by-play. There is this one announcer, I forget what her name is, but she does like the Raider preseason games. She does college games. There's Doris Burke, who does the NBA. Obviously, I don't think like either one of them have a real big passion for wrestling, but that's just showing that there are women out there in the sports world who are commentators who are very much respected. I mean, Doris Burke is probably one of the best commentators in the game, male or female. So, good for Renee for getting this spot on Raw. Don't think it's going to be a permanent seat, just kind of a fill-in. Maybe Booker T wasn't available, or they just are kind of doing this to honestly, pat WWE on the head a little bit more and saying, oh, look, we're making all these historic announcements and historic moves that we're having Renee Young be the first woman ever to be an announcer on Raw. So I'm always a little suspicious when it comes to WWE and these historic announcements, but hats off to Renee. Hopefully she does well on Raw, and maybe I'll actually pay attention to the commentary team on Raw, because I tend to like kind of zone out and just kind of listen or just watch the matches and whatever's going on and just kind of not really listen to the commentators. But on this one, I'm definitely have to kind of keep a close eye or close ear and listen to what Renee is doing. So finally in news, we have the ROH and New Japan joint show running in MSG on the Saturday before WrestleMania, the G1 Supercard show. It is damn near sold out. They sold about 9,000 tickets to their Honor Club members. They sold another 3,000 on a pre-sale code. I believe the tickets are already on sale. I do not know how to get them. Maybe I can do a quick little search right here. I don't know, ROH MSG tickets. Maybe I can do a little live looking right now. Even my Wi-Fi is just terrible at this moment, so I don't know if I can even. I don't even know where they're being sold at because I have not really looked into it all that much. But anyways, it looks like ROH and New Japan is going to sell out the Madison Square Garden. This will be the first time that anyone has sold out Madison Square Garden besides WWE, for wrestling ever. Last time WWE sold out MSG was in 2015, and then before that it was like 2011 or something like that. So WWE, even though they all say that MSG is their home base, they don't sell it out all that often. They get big crowds, they get 13,000, but it looks like ROH and New Japan's going to get that 15,000 crowd that they've been hoping for. Obviously much bigger than the show they did last year and bigger than the All-In show that's happening on September 1st. I don't know exactly if this is the reason why they've sold out, that they're going to sell out is because it's historic, if they are excited for what's going to be on the show. I mean, if it was me, I would want to go to the MSG show just because of the historic nature of it. Dave Meltzer, I think, reported that this is going to be the first time ever a wrestling show is going to surpass $1 million gate that has not been promoted by Vince McMahon, so that is very big news for that. I don't exactly know gate numbers and all that stuff, but 1 million are probably just reserved for WrestleMania gates and very, very big like SummerSlams or Royal Rumble shows. So big news for ROH and New Japan. I do not think Vince McMahon is happy about this move from his competitors. It's going to be fun to see what's going on later down the line because, as we said, the Young Bucks, Cody and Kenny, their contracts are coming up. So none of them have been advertised for the show. So basically, they've just sold out this show strictly on announcing that they're going to be running MSG. They haven't announced a match. They haven't announced anything. I mean, I think they have announced Marty Scurll and Okada. I think that's like they're doing a rematch from All In for that. I'm not exactly sure if that's just they've announced talent or that's an actual match that's going on. But big news for the independent wrestling scene. The WrestleMania weekend in New York next year is quite possibly going to be the biggest WrestleMania weekend of all time. Maybe not in terms of numbers, in terms of different events going on. Maybe they've kind of popped, the bubbles kind of bursted on like every single wrestling thing thing in America coming to one place and running all these little shows, because it honestly is very hard to keep up with all the different shows going on. I mean, I went to WrestleMania 31, and it was not as big as it was now, which is weird to say because it was only 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. We're at WrestleMania 34. This was 3 years ago. And yet, WrestleMania weekend has grown so much bigger. I mean, NXT, the first time that they've ever ran like a kind of a takeover type show outside of Full Sail was that weekend at WrestleMania 31, and it was like kind of like a last minute thing. I tried to get ROH tickets, they were sold out. I mean, they had Evolve stuff going on, but that was basically it. Like they was just like Evolve, the ROH, the NXT show, and there were some other, I think, smaller indies going on. They had the King of the Indies stuff going on, but that's more of a local thing because APW is based out of the Bay Area. So I mean, just seeing all these different companies just kind of maybe not latch onto the WrestleMania banner, but just taking all these wrestling fans who might honestly, not all these wrestling fans on this weekend go to WrestleMania. They just go there for all the other shows, and especially with New York being the biggest market in the country, there's a lot of people to draw from, and it looks like ROH and New Japan are going to be very successful on that front. So let's move into the G1 Climax. Just going up to the show that happened on Wednesday. So I'm not going to talk about the show that happened today. Once again, I try to kind of keep it kind of in, like, you know, kind of split it right at the last match. I don't want to talk about it A block, even though we still got B block stuff to go. So right now, as I'm talking, I do not know what happened last night. So we have the final matches set for the A block and the B block, the semifinals, you might say. So we have the big match that's going to happen to determine the A block is Okada versus Tanahashi. And in the B block, we have some different scenarios that are going on after what happened on Wednesday. So Kota Ibushi went up against Tama Tonga, and once again, Tama Tonga gets his goons involved and shenanigans ensues, to where Kota Ibushi actually loses to Tama Tonga. And then Kenny Omega, during the match, Kenny Omega tries to make the save, but unfortunately he was not able to do so. And then he gets a powerbomb from Tonga Loa, and then Yano comes out. Yano almost gets the quick victory, but then they go back and forth, and Yano beats Kenny Omega, as I speculated might happen. And this was the largest point differential upset in G1 history, with Kenny Omega having 12 points, and at the moment, Yano only having 2 points, so now Yano's moved to 4. And so this has set up a scenario with Naito beating Sonata in an LIJ inter-squad battle. This sets up to where Naito is tied, or hold on, let me pull up the standings right now, just because the B block is very confusing. The A block is much more straight ahead, or well, it's not so much straight ahead as I thought it was, because right now Tanahashi is tied, or leads the entire pack with 14. Jay White is at 12, and then Okada is at 12. So basically what needs to happen for Jay White to win is he just needs to win, and then he needs Okada to beat Tanahashi. So then everyone's tied at 14, but Jay White beat Tanahashi and Okada. And then for Okada to win, Jay White has to lose to who is he facing? He has to lose to Evil, which is no slouch in his own. He beat Okada last year. He took Okada to the limit this year. So Okada needs help from Evil to beat Jay White, and then Okada needs to beat Tanahashi to have a tie for first, but then obviously Okada has the tiebreaker in that situation. So as of this moment, I'm talking about all things that have already happened, so I don't really want to go into my speculation of what's going to happen, but I kind of said it last week that I think it's going to come down between Tanahashi and Okada. Obviously, that's going to be the main event of the show. I think Jay White's going to lose to Evil. Maybe his backfiring, his interference or his cheating backfires, which is kind of what he's been doing a lot, but it's been more kind of sneaky cheating than what the Tongans have been doing, which is just outright, chair shots right in front of the referee. So maybe he tries to do something, he gets disqualified. I don't know if I want to see that. I think we would just a straight up great match between Jay White and Evil would be amazing. And then having the main event be Tanahashi and Okada, possibly for the last time, the biggest stakes not thus far, but real big stakes going forward. Both of the guys not having a championship, both of them trying to get their careers back on track. Tanahashi maybe going for the last ride. Okada trying to get his mojo back. He's been on a roll lately. So that's what I'm going with. Jay White losing, and then the Tanahashi-Okada match being the for all the marbles. But then when it comes down to the B block, it gets a lot more complicated because we have Kenny Omega and Tetsuya Naito tied at 12, but yet Naito lost to Omega, so that has Omega in the tiebreaker. And then Kota Ibushi is at 10 points, and Ibushi beat Naito, right? I think it's getting very complicated at this point, but yes, no, Naito beat Ibushi. Yes. Okay. So now that we got all those scenarios out the way, so Naito needs to win, and then Kota Ibushi. Let's see, hold on. Let me read through. Okay, let me just read through the scenario. So right now I'm on the Observer, so I have the stands in front of me. The three men still alive in the block are Omega, Ibushi, and Naito. This gets very complicated. At this point, Omega needs to win his match with Ibushi, or he's out. Same thing for Ibushi. For Naito to win, he would need to beat Zack Sabre Jr., then hope Omega and Ibushi draw, because then that would give him 14 points, and then Omega 13 points, because Omega beat Naito on the first night. So if they were to be tied at 14, Omega would edge out on whatever you would call it, a tiebreaker, or on just because of head-to-head matchups. Then another scenario that could also have Ibushi win his match, but also have Naito win. In this case, Naito would edge out Ibushi and win the block. So Ibushi would need to beat Kenny Omega, but have Tetsuya Naito lose, I suppose, and then Naito would either have to win, and then have Ibushi win against Omega, or maybe they can. What I thought would be a very interesting thing is where Naito wins his match, so Ibushi knows that he's going to be out of the running. And then it's going to come down to Omega and Ibushi, and they're just going to go, balls to the wall. And then the only way for Omega to win, Omega either needs to beat Ibushi, so possibly Ibushi lays down for his friend just so he can win, because Ibushi knows that he has no chance of winning the match or winning the block. And I don't think they would do that, but I think that would be just sort of a fun little story that they could tell, of having Ibushi possibly would rather have Omega beat him in the final seconds of a block match than have Naito go on. I mean, they don't have exactly a blood feud between Naito and Ibushi, but just having maybe Ibushi kind of torn between having his friend lose, even though he didn't really lose because he tied and blah 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 blah. But I don't think that's going to exactly happen. I think possibly what could happen, I think Ibushi probably, I was a little shocked that he lost his match with Tama Tonga. I thought they were just going to have a straight up, everyone has 12 points, winner goes on, loser, because then Naito, that gets a little tricky, because then Naito would have to have, it's very confusing up at this point in the B block, but I can't wait to see what happens. Going to watch the A block possibly today, maybe tomorrow, and then get the B block in the next night, and then maybe stay up that Sunday. I think it's Sunday. I don't even remember. For the final showing of the B block, for the B block action. Or no, it'd be Saturday. Saturday going into Sunday? Yeah, whatever. Who cares? But some of the matches that stood out to me since we last recorded. Jay White, Yoshihashi, that was cool. Evil and Tanahashi, good stuff. Minoru Suzuki and Okada was great. But I think the match everyone's talking about right now is Kenny Omega and Ishii. I said Ishii is my MVP for the whole tournament. Ishii was able to defeat Kenny Omega, and that is the reason why he was not undefeated going into that match with Yano. So Kenny Omega loses to Ishii and loses to Yano. I speculated last week that maybe that Ishii just took everything out of Kenny and he was going to be drained, and that's how he was going to possibly lose to Yano. But they had the excuse of the Tongans interfering and him trying to make the save for his boy, and everything didn't work out that well. But on the other show, nothing real stands out on the A block. There's just, they're all just decent matches at this point. We're just kind of waiting for the the semifinals and the finals, because that's when everyone's going to really turn up. But yeah, I mean, Kota Ibushi once again jumping off of tall things, does a backflip off not the second, I guess the first. I don't know exactly how you would call it, but he jumps off a high structure and lands on Tama Tonga. Kenny and Yano, they had a fun little comedy match. It was for what it was. Sanada and Naito, I thought they had a real good match. I didn't think the crescendo was as good as it could have been. I kind of felt like it was an out of nowhere finish with Naito hitting the Destino on Sanada, but Goto and Zack Sabre Jr. just beating the piss out of each other. The B block action, as I already talked about, Kenny is going to face Ibushi, but then Naito is facing off against Zack Sabre Jr., which is no small task because Zack Sabre Jr. has lost a couple times in roll-up situation. He has tapped some people out. So I assume Kenny and Ibushi is going to be the main event, and then we're going to have Naito and Sabre Jr. before that, so we're going to see what happens with that match to determine what's going to happen in the second match. But if Naito loses, then it's just going to come down to Ibushi and Kenny, winner take all, or if Naito wins and things get a little bit more complicated, as I speculated. So, on to the NXT report. As we haven't talked about it yet on the Bulletcast, I believe. Aleister Black has suffered an injury. We're going to talk about that a little bit after the taping and what they did to kind of clean some of that stuff up. The main event of NXT TakeOver Brooklyn has been changed. And let's just get into the show. Amber Nova, I don't even know why I'm reading this, but Nikki Cross comes out and faces Amber Nova. Her gimmick is that she's like a mechanic's daughter. She has a 68 Chevy Nova, which is why she has the last name Nova. She knows how to change her oil and all that other good fun stuff. Nikki Cross wins in about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. It was about a 50-50 match. It was an alright. I mean, it's not a straight-up squash for Nikki Cross. Nikki Cross kind of still spinning her wheels, beating NXT. Is she going to get called up? She was on the stage when the big Evolution announcement was made, so is she going to be there? Is she going to come up with sanity? Is she just going to be her own person? I don't exactly know what to do in Nikki Cross up to this point. I think they've done enough with her in the title picture. If Shayna Baszler is going to be the champion for the long haul, I don't think we want to see another Nikki Cross Shayna Baszler title match at a TakeOver, maybe on a NXT television show. But just interesting to see what they do with Nikki Cross here. A good worker, good personality on the show. She definitely can help out the younger talent, but just kind of a squash match, keeping her in the same spot she always was. So then we have a vignette for Keith Lee, just kind of simple, him in the ring, kind of running the ropes, and him voicing over, just kind of talking about how everyone's going to bask in his glory. Ricochet was supposed to come out for a match, but instead the Undisputed Era attacked him, and they drug his lifeless body. Well, what happened was Ricochet's music played, but Undisputed Era come out holding Ricochet, and they kind of just dump him on the stage. And then Adam Cole cuts a promo on him, talking about how he's going to beat him at TakeOver, and says that he's, a champion, and he's going to keep the championship. And then, that's it. Backstage, we see Vanessa Bourne warming up for her qualifying match for the Mae Young Classic. She kind of little smug about the cameras being in her face, and the promo itself was not that good, to be honest. And then she talked about how she's going to beat Tainara Conti for the last spot in the Mae Young Classic. Adrian Jadot comes out, and he's a big dude. He came out in a black belt and a gi. He is Brazilian. He's a very intimidating looking figure, and then he goes up against Cassius Ohno. Cassius Ohno beats him in under 3 minutes. I thought this was a really good victory for Cassius Ohno. I'm just going to call him Adrian, even though I'm Portuguese and the other guy's Brazilian. I should be able to pronounce his name, but I'm white. I'm a white Portuguese, so how am I supposed to really know how to say it? But anyways, Adrian looked like a very intimidating force, and Ohno being able to put him away that easily really builds up Ohno's credibility. I kind of like what they're doing right now. He's getting very quick victories over maybe not credible opponents, but credible looking opponents, as Adrian was in this one. Ono putting on a serious face. He was real mean mugging him after the fact, and then he kind of put on a little bit of a smile at the end. So maybe Ono possibly teasing a heel turn for maybe a Johnny Gargano feud or a Johnny Gargano title victory. Maybe, I don't know, but just kind of interesting to see what they're doing here with Ono, because obviously he just hasn't really done a whole lot. He had the good match with Velveteen Dream in the past, but just really hasn't had that moment to shine and have a real big main event. He hasn't main evented a takeover. He's had a big name on the indie scene. I mean, I've seen him have good matches to great matches at APW shows, and I'm a big proponent of him. I know the body just isn't the best in the world, but I mean, we have a guy coming up here who doesn't have a great body, but I think his body fits him a little bit better than Ono's body fits him. So yeah, just Ono kind of mean mugging him a little bit, and then we go to a video package of Velveteen Dream and EC3, and EC3 is he's experiencing the dream, and all it was kind of like at a little Orlando resort or some sort of like hotel, sort of a comedy type vignette with them just kind of being over the top and just kind of turning up their kookiness and just going kind of back and forth. And EC3 dumps Velveteen Dream in the water, and Velveteen Dream pretends like he's drowning, but then EC3 tells him to get up because it's only like 3 feet of water. And then they kind of, that was basically it. I mean, EC3 kind of talked trash and telling him how he's going to beat him at TakeOver. So, I don't know. I mean, I did not think this was a very good segment for either one of them. But, yeah. So then next up, we have the debut of Keith Lee going up against Marcel Barthel. He's kind of he's a German nationalist, I guess. I don't know. I guess he's a Nazi. I don't know if that's the... I don't even... I'm like reading the report, and it says that he was playing up some German nationalist thing, bordering on tasteless. And maybe that's what they were going for. Maybe they're going for the Nazi thing. But Keith Lee makes his debut against Marcel. Lee goes over in 4 minutes and 26 seconds. Good match, I thought. Keith Lee took a lot of offense from Marcel, so I wasn't a big fan of that. Keith Lee kind of did his power stuff to the beginning, and then kind of shocked the crowd, I guess, by doing a leapfrog and a really good drop kick. Haven't seen a lot of Keith Lee on the indie scene, but I know his reputation. Big dude who can fly. I guess I would say this was a good step in the right direction. I'm not going to say I love the match overall just because I didn't think Keith Lee shined as much as he could. I thought Marcel got way too much of the offense in. Maybe that's a sign that they have high hopes for Marcel, or maybe they're just testing Keith Lee on his attitude, maybe seeing if he's, how he can sell, if he's going to, throw a little temper tantrum because he had to sell so much in his debut, and that's going to hurt his credibility going forward, but... nice little step in the right direction. So then we had a Street Profits promo sitting outside an ATM, and they just talked about the Mighty, who changed the name to TM61. Angelo Dawkins does a bad fake Australian accent. They go back and forth. Fun little segment between Ford and Dawkins here, setting up a tag team match between the two teams next week. So that should be fun. And then they hype up the women's match between Vanessa Bourne and Tayanara Kanti. Tayanara. It's like Sayonara, but Tayanara Kanti. She's also Brazilian. Her name's a little bit easier to spell, or a little bit easier to pronounce. So Vanessa Bourne goes up against Tayanara Kanti. The announcer is hyped up that both of these women were in last year's Mae Young Classic and hoping that they can get another spot to do better than what they did last year. And the match itself was a little clunky. Tayanara goes over in 4 minutes and 5 seconds. It was just, the match was all right. I mean, Vanessa Bourne, I don't think it was a good showing for her. Both of them kind of seemed like heels, so I didn't exactly know who to root for. I just kind of sided with Conti just because she's Brazilian. But I mean, the promo backstage with Bourne definitely didn't put her in a babyface light. Tainara just kind of came out with a mean mug. I mean, she's a pretty girl and she kicks ass, but she kind of had her mean mug on the entire time. She wasn't, kind of a Dakota Kai or a, Bailey smiling babyface. She, was there to kick ass. So it was, and with no promo time, no real promos or any type of character development between these two women. It was really hard to tell who's babyface in the situation. I think the crowd thought the same thing. There just was not a lot of heat here on this match, and I think that's what made the match suffer. Not a great match. There were some unique moves, and they took some risks, but nobody got hurt, and that's all I could ask for, as I say, in some of these women's matches. Tyler Bate is going to face Roderick Strong next week, and in the crowd, MMA star, former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez was in the crowd looking at the NXT TV taping. So obviously this was the same day or around the same time where Cain came in to train. I mean, I talked about it on the Bulletcast a little bit. I don't think he's going to be in WWE anytime soon. I don't see him. He was never really a charismatic guy in the UFC. He's a good athlete, big dude. Don't know. A little bit had an injury history, but that's kind of what happens honestly, that's kind of what has happened in wrestling, period. I mean, people come from, playing football or playing other sports. They get injured. They can't play anymore. So then they go over to wrestling. Wrestling's a hard sport to do. A little bit. There is possibly a greater injury risk, but if you're a football star or a big dude, you're not going to be bumping all that often and having to take all these gigantic risks like some of the smaller wrestlers. But it was a fun little sight to see Cain in the crowd. Gargano and Aleister Black have their match. Gargano kind of got a little bit of a muted response, which is expected just of what's been going on with his character. He's not exactly the over babyface as he was. He's kind of a conflicted babyface, which I think is going to hurt him going into the match. But now that it's just going to be a singles match for the NXT Championship, I think Gargano is probably going to get the big pop and everyone's going to play along. But I think it might be maybe not 50-50, maybe 70-30. Maybe there'll be some more people siding with Ciampa in the match just because of what's been going on with Gargano and their story they've been telling. But Aleister Black goes on to face Johnny Gargano. Only 2 minutes and 30 seconds. They're not going to say they were showing anything special in the match. They just had a little bit of good interaction, some good back and forth, some kicks, some rolls and stuff like that. Tommaso Ciampa comes out at the 2:30 mark and interferes in the match, trying to beat up both of them. A little bit of a schmoz. They go back and forth, and then the referees are able to separate all of them. William Regal comes out onto the stage and announces that there will be a triple threat match for the first time in NXT history for the NXT Championship. A triple threat match between these three will go on at NXT Brooklyn, and the crowd was asking for it, and they got it. So that was it for the NXT show. Overall, the show itself I thought was maybe a little below average. Just they had a lot of short matches. The promos itself was not all that well. I mean, the Street Profits promo was probably the best one they had. The Keith Lee debut was fun. As I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of how they booked him in the match, though. Women's match, the Nikki Cross squash was fine, but the qualifying match for the Mae Young Classic was not that good. So not a lot of good wrestling on the show, not a lot of real story progression on the show, except for the announcement for the triple threat, but we all kind of saw that coming. I mean, the EC3 Velveteen Dream thing was all kind of, I thought it was kind of kooky and, just kind of two wacky characters going back and forth. So, obviously, they're on the road to NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Next week is the go-home show, so I assume that's where they're going to put all this stuff that aired on YouTube this week, or next week, rather. And they're going to try to clean up some things, which obviously is really hard to do. Post-production, you're going to have to put in all these little promos and all these little things that were supposed to happen for one thing, and now you got to shake things up and make them unnoticeable to the naked eye that you had to change all these things up. But as I kind of teased on WWE's YouTube channel, they posted a backstage interview with William Regal, which I love how NXT does this. They have all these different ways of showing you one thing and then that leads into something else, because sometimes in WWE on the main roster they just kind of show something out of nowhere and you're like, wow, that's very convenient that a camera happens to be there. What happens if the camera wasn't there? But in this case, the interviewer was asking William Regal about the triple threat match. And then some guy comes in and tells William Regal that something happened, and they go back to the backstage area. It was kind of funny how they had so many wrestlers just kind of backstage, just kind of doing their own thing. It's kind of like, reminds me of, I don't know, like some sort of like cartoon or something like a kid would have, where like, you know, there's this big wonderland of all these like superheroes and they're all just kind of off doing their own thing. And so you see Johnny Gargano coming in the door while William Regal's leaving the door, so that's the first little hint of something happened. Maybe, you know, they're all kind of dropping hints with all these different people being in the shot, so where you think maybe they're involved. So they go. Heavy Machinery is also in the shot. It's very hard because there's two different shots, there's two different videos that they show. So the first one is just William Regal getting there, asking what happened. Aleister's just completely laid out, non-responsive, just, you know, laying down like a starfish. And then later on, they make the announcement that it is going to be Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa singles match in a last man standing match. So just another gimmick match between the two. Obviously, this is not the way they're heading. Possibly that's what they were going for Survivor Series or some other sort of takeover. But I thought the Aleister Black dynamic, adding him in for the triple threat match, I think it really added some extra oomph to this program. I mean, I'm not going to say I was tired of it, but I think it was kind of waning. It was kind of going on the downhill of Gargano and Ciampa kind of being tired of seeing it over and over and over again. And unfortunately, they had to probably go to the well before they wanted to, but that just is what it is with wrestling. Just kind of a freak injury with Black getting crotched and having to be on the show for a couple months, possibly. There was talk of maybe Matt Riddle maybe making a run-in and being added to the title match, but I just didn't understand why would they do that. That's just something NXT would not do, giving a title shot to someone who is unproven in NXT. And I mean, if anything, I'd much rather them give it to Ono than give it to Matt Riddle. I know people would be like, oh my god, Matt Riddle, it'd be this big moment of him showing up. I think he will show up. I think he will be in the crowd at least, and at the most, maybe he comes out, and I don't think he's going to do anything. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they do. NXT, they always have some things up their sleeves. But as I was saying, there was another video that was kind of like a handheld or some sort of camera phone, and it was kind of more backstage footage of all these other people. You had Tommaso Ciampa clutching his title, walking away, so setting the hint of that happening. In the first video, you have the Undisputed Era all in a car. They were driving away. That's what I was thinking of. Then you had Ricochet being interviewed, but Ricochet didn't know anything was happening. Shayna Baszler was there. I mean, you never know. Maybe Shayna Baszler laid out Aleister Black for some reason. So just all these different wrestlers that there's planting the seed of maybe they did something, but probably none of them did anything, and they're just going to kind of do something out of the blue. And so that is it for the NXT recap and all the different things that happened to cover up the Aleister Black injury. And last but certainly not least, the Miz and Mrs. recap. But first, let's talk about Total Bellas getting it renewed for, I believe, a 4th season. They talked about it on SmackDown, so more Total Bellas recaps to come. But on this episode of Miz and Mrs., Maryse and her mom go to infant CPR training because obviously you want to be prepared as much as possible as a parent in case something happens to your child. You want to do CPR, and Maryse's mom's a little bit of a trip. She's a little kooky and out there. I don't know if it's put on for the camera, but she was falling asleep during the CPR class. She does all these other things. Miz was a little perturbed that Maryse did the CPR class without her because he wants to be involved in everything. And so then this led up to later on in the show that the Miz was able to get someone to come to one of the WWE shows, and him and Dolph Ziggler, both in their tights, were performing CPR to infant baby dolls, or I don't know what you would call the things you practice on for CPR training. But Miz surprised Maryse by showing him his certificate of CPR training. So that was a cute little moment between the two, and I guess the big storyline was Maryse's love for truffles. Her and Miz went out to a dinner one night, and she ordered some like truffles or some noodles with truffles on them or something. I don't exactly know what truffles are, and I don't order very expensive things like that. But they order it. They get the bill. Maryse loved them. She said they tasted fantastic. They get the bill. I was saying it was going to be like $300, but no, it was like $650. Miz said that his stuff only costed $35, which I don't know if that's exactly true. I mean, maybe it is, but maybe he just blamed all the different appetizers and everything else on Maryse. But so yeah, he says that Maryse ordered like $600 worth of things while he only ordered $35, and the Miz was destined to try to find a cheaper replacement for his wife's truffle addiction, because she actually ordered the truffles to be delivered one day, and that was a surprise to the Miz, and then he had to pay for it, of course. He tried to make some discount truffles, and Maryse did not like it. She was feeding it to the dog, and then Miz, he tried it, and he confessed that it was not the best thing in the world. And then they go to a doctor's appointment, and the doctor kind of tells her that she's going to have a C-section because of Maryse's back surgery that she's had. So she obviously doesn't want to put so much pressure on Maryse's back and give birth naturally and possibly risk re-injuring or doing something to her back. So she's going to have a C-section, which is also good news for Mike, because they talk about how Monroe Sky, as she would later be known as, was going to be born. Her due date is 2 days before WrestleMania, so they can schedule the C-section, I guess, earlier, so Miz can be there for the birth of the child, and he doesn't have to stress out and miss all the WrestleMania activities or miss the birth of his kid. Oh, I think he was going to miss the birth of his kid to go to WrestleMania, which, I don't blame him. I mean, there's a bunch of different sports people who miss the birth of their child to go to play in the World Series or the Super Bowl or something like that. Just not ill-timed, but, pregnancies that are they contradict with the biggest time of the year, and obviously for wrestlers, WrestleMania is the biggest time of the year, biggest paycheck of the year. Miz probably made, between $500,000 or $1 million just for his appearance at WrestleMania, so, don't get that money, Miz. I ain't tripping about that. But then in the end, Miz, as the good husband that he is, he ends up paying for the expensive truffles and gives it to Maryse, and she says that she couldn't even eat them because the doctor said she's fat, and she's 7 pounds overweight, and she's going to be gaining even more weight by the time the baby comes. So she's not allowed to eat all that stuff because she needs to be on a diet. She needs to be health. I don't exactly know what happens with pregnancies and all the weights and all the stuff like that, but the very first shot you see in Miz and Mrs. is Maryse realizing that her hands have swelled up and she can't take her ring off, so the Miz is trying all these different things to try to take the ring off, and I guess in the end they actually get it off, but we don't actually see how they do that. Maybe the swelling goes down a little bit and she's able to pop the ring off. But that is it for the Miz and Mrs. recap. Only a half hour. It's kind of digestible, especially after SmackDown. Kind of around the time I eat, so kind of watch Miz and Mrs. Just kind of you don't have to think a whole lot about it. Just having the Miz and Maryse get into their shenanigans. So yes, that will do it for me for today. Thank you guys very much for listening. Don't forget to follow the Bulletcast on all the different social medias, on Twitter, on Instagram. Email us questions at bulletcast2sweet. That is the number 2 sweet. So yeah, email us a question. You can be featured on our fan mail site. Comment questions on our Instagram, which is probably the easiest way to contact us. Slide into the DMs. Listen to my other podcast that I do, Curveballs and Chair Shots, where I talk about sports as well as wrestling. Don't worry, now we've kind of changed up the format to where the sports comes first and then the wrestling, so you don't have to listen to the same old hot takes that I've been giving the past couple days. We're going to talk about NFL preseason, talk about some baseball, and some other things that have happened in the sports world, as well as possibly some other breaking news that happens in wrestling, because the news cycle never stops. especially on the past couple days. Maybe by this point, for Curveballs and Sure Shots, they will make the official announcement that MSG has sold out for the G1 Supercard show, which should be a fun thing to see. So that is it for me. Thank you guys all for listening or watching this on YouTube. I don't exactly know how Philip does it. Maybe you're just staring at a picture the entire time for 50 minutes. But as long as you digested this content. Thank you guys. Goodbye and good night. Bang.